only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
You found your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Thank you for joining us today. You found us on Thursday, which means it's Foundations of Freedom Thursday. Love our topics on Thursdays because we're talking about the principles that made America great in the first place, covering things out of the Constitution and the Declaration, what the founders thought would make a great society and a wonderful nation. And, of course, David, they definitely loved the idea of a king, since that had worked out so well for them in their lifetimes.
You went to public school, didn't you?
Yeah, I did part of the time. Yeah, I mean, that is what they gave us, right? They wanted us to have a king.
That's right. And they also, after they got tired of the king, they gave us a democracy, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, but one that even then it really didn't matter much what the people thought, because if the king, or in our case we decided to use a nice word and call him president, if he wanted to make his own laws, that'd be okay. I mean, because he's doing it for the good of the people.
And while we're at what they wanted to give us, not only did they give us an imperial monarch, or a president or a king or whatever, and not only did they give us a democracy, they also gave us judges with lifetime appointments, because, you know, you really want these guys to be on there for a while and be
not accountable. You wouldn't want them to have to answer to anything they did.
That would make judiciary a political branch. You don't want them to be political and have to answer and be accountable. If they're independent of the people, then they can better understand what the law says and not have to worry about political pressure. So
we could teach in most law schools across the country with what we've just thrown out. I mean, that's right on target with what they're tending to teach people these days.
And every one of them is absolutely unconstitutional. I mean, the Constitution is explicit that every one of those things is wrong. Article 4, Section 4, we're not a democracy, we are a republic. We do not have an imperial presidency. Article 2 makes that real clear. Article 3, judges do not have lifetime appointments despite what we're told in school today. They must be accountable. I mean, all of those things are out there, and it's a real problem because we are being taught the opposite of what's out there, and therefore, when one of those branches begins to behave the opposite of what's intended, but consistent with what's been said about them, we don't stop them. Because, you know, after all, we all know that judges have lifetime appointments, and so there's nothing we can do about it, so we don't even try because we've been told, and pardon me, they don't have. And it's the same with the presidency. We've been told that, you know, once you're in office, and we've heard this from Republicans on confirming, why did you confirm Sotomayor and why did you confirm Hagan? Well, you know, he won the election and you defer to him because the people chose him and because, I mean, we're just here to let him do what he wants to kind of stuff. And that's the message you get all the way through. And it's become an interesting problem. When you go back to the Constitution, and this is Foundation of Freedom Thursday, you go back to the Constitution, it's very explicit about what the president is to do and how he is to do it. It gives both process and gives objectives. And as you look at what's happening right now in the country, those are not being followed. I mean, a real simple one. You just take what we're told concerning the powers of the presidency in Article 2. We're told that his primary purpose is to faithfully execute the laws of the land. I mean, that's the constitutional purpose for the president. That's why he's the executive branch, because he is to execute the laws. So you take that as the objective, and you just kind of draw back and say, now, wait a minute, is the president actually doing that? Is he faithfully executing the laws of the land? And you and I haven't talked about this before the program started, but off the top of your head, name some laws that he's refused to execute that are the laws of the land.
Well, it seems like it started with the definition of marriage. I mean, he refused to enforce DOMA, and
that was the law of the land. He didn't agree with it, but that was the law of the land.
Immigration, refused to enforce the laws that were on the books and what Congress had passed. Not only did he not enforce some laws, he actually just reversed some laws. Welfare to work, that law signed by Clinton. Man, there's a long list. A lot of religious liberty. protections, that rights of conscience that he refused to protect. Man, you just go down the line and you start thinking, I guess he can make law by himself because we're not doing much about it whenever he reverses or refuses to enforce.
And that is what's happening. And you've mentioned a bunch of them. And all the way through all those areas, what he's done in education, the federal law says that students must be proficient in math and reading by 2014, but he's gone in and told states they don't have to comply with that law if they'll just get on board with his new educational program, the Race to the Top. So if they'll do that, and by the way, Race to the Top didn't go through Congress. It's something he came up with, but I'll let you out of federal law if you'll do what I wrote as policy. So all the way across, he's done this, not executing the federal laws.
I forgot about health care, David.
What about health care?
Well, I mean, he's exempted people without Congress doing the exemptions. That's ignoring the law. They said in the beginning, it's the law. It's the law. You got to follow the law. So far, 27 times he's rewritten the law unilaterally. He did not go through Congress, did not go through any process, but he's decided to move the deadlines that are in the law. He's decided to alter the variables that are in the law for who is and is not covered and how they will be covered. I mean, he's gone through the law, and in 27 instances has said, well, I don't like the way it says that now. Here's what I'm going to do with it. So he's done that. And by the way, on the immigration laws, this is what he sent officials to tell Congress, and this is what they told Congress in hearings. They said that the president has the right, quote, to tell law enforcement agents which laws to enforce and which ones to ignore, and that the president can set policies that, quote, violate the mandates of congressional law. Now, do you think you might be able to do that if you wanted to? You could decide which laws you wanted to enforce and not enforce, and you could make policies that violate law and nothing would happen to you? Well, I was going to say to the first half of that, sure, I could do that, and then I'd be singing from a jail cell somewhere. Exactly. And so this aspect of him not doing that fundamental part of his presidency, it's a real problem. Then you also go to where Article 1, Article 2 talks about appointments, and it makes sure that presidential appointments have to have the confirmation of the Senate. And the Federalist Papers are very clear about that. Justice Story, other commentators in the Constitution do that to keep the president from appointing unfit officers or political hacks. And so unless the Constitution says that Congress specifically passes a law calling by name and title lower level things like postmasters, and unless the law says, well, you don't have to confirm postmasters, then whatever the president nominates has to be confirmed by Congress. Well, at this point, he has come up with 43 czars on his own. And czars have extensive power. And the Constitution made sure that anybody that has extensive power has to go through a confirmation process so that you can weed out incompetence. So you now have this extensive power. He has 43 czars, and 33 of them he has appointed without any kind of congressional confirmation. So he's ignoring all the articles about congressional confirmation. By the way, Constitution also gives him the right to fill recess appointments, and that's because Congress is usually out of session 6, 7, 8 months a year. And so if you needed a new Secretary of State or Secretary of War, you couldn't call all the congressmen, hop on their horses, and ride back to Washington, D.C. and confirm the new secretary. So he got to make temporary appointments, but as soon as Congress came back to town, then they had to vote on that confirmation. So it was a temporary appointment. Well, Congress made the mistake this recently of adjourning for Christmas and New Year, and he took that adjournment to be the cause of recess appointments. Made appointments to the National Labor Relations Board, put a bunch of pro-union people in there that would not have survived a hearing in the Senate. So he's ignoring that part of the process. But David, it's for the good of the people. I mean, I'm sure he's looking out for us. I mean, shouldn't we allow him to do what he thinks is best for the country, regardless of what an old piece of paper says? Well, does it concern you at all that he's doing this stuff as a citizen? Does it bother you? I'm sure he's just looking out for my interest. You didn't answer my question. Does it bother you? Me personally? Yeah. I'm livid over it. Are you kidding me? Thank you very much. The rule of law matters. I mean, there's a reason those things are in the Constitution. But I keep hearing people say, that's just technicalities, and he's just doing what's best for us. Well, there's some other people that'll live on it. So after break, let's look at some other people who live and what they're doing with it. All right, we'll take a quick break, folks. You're listening to Foundations of Freedom Thursday right here on WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The constitutions of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that is their right and duty, to be at all times armed, and that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press.
Hey friends, Rick Green. You're about to hear from some students at Patriot Academy this last summer from all over the country. I encourage you to visit patriotacademy.com. Right on the homepage there, a video is going to start playing. It's just 60 seconds. You're about to hear the audio from that video, but you're really going to want to watch the video and share it with your friends and family. We are so excited about what God's doing with the next generation.
I have a destiny.
Freedom isn't just for politicians.
It's meant for each of us.
To play a role.
To be significant.
To be significant.
To live with purpose. My life has meaning.
I have a destiny.
Who am I? Does it matter? I was given one life.
If not us, then who?
If not now, when?
Let's change the world.
People say you can't change the world because you're young or inexperienced.
Because you aren't ready.
But I'm training every single day, and I have a voice. I will give this life everything I've got.
Because I am a champion.
We all have one life to give.
I am a patriot, and I have a destiny.
We're training up a generation of champions to change the world. Hope that you will help us and that you'll spread the word and let others know about it. Visit today, patriotacademy.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
George Washington. The Constitution approaches nearer to perfection than any other government hitherto instituted among men.
Welcome back to Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live. We're talking specifically today about the presidency and the monarchy of the United States. At least that's the way it seems to be playing out anyway. So, David, we talked about how our president, current occupant of the White House, has essentially ignored the Constitution and decided to be an imperial president and operate like a king.
Yeah, and it's really made some people mad, and it made Congress mad. So they had a hearing. It was called Enforcing the President's Constitutional Duty to Faithfully Execute the Laws. They've been noticing, too, that he's not following the law. He's not executing. He's not doing what the Constitution tells him. Granted, he is a constitutional law professor, and that's probably why he doesn't do what the Constitution says, because there's very few constitutional law professors today that have a conservative view of the Constitution. It's a living document. But Congress really ticks, so they have this hearing, and they call
Actually, David, I got to ask you, though, don't you think even the fact they had the hearing is a positive sign? Because we've both said for years, look, if one branch is out of control and doing things, it's the other two branches that are supposed to, call them in check and push back on them if they're encroaching on them. And we haven't seen much of that over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So this is good. One branch is saying to another branch, hey, hold up.
It's good that Congress is ticked off. And so they brought constitutional law professors in to testify about this. And what happens when you have the majority party in, and right now it's Republicans in the House, it's going to be a majority of people who come in to testify that what's going on is wrong, and the minority will say what's going on is right. So that's the way it works. When the Democrats have it, if there's 9 people on a panel, Democrats will pick 6 and the Republicans will pick 3. If Republicans have it, it's going to be the other way around. So these panels kind of get stacked in the direction of whoever the party is that called it. But Republicans called this hearing on enforcing the president's constitutional duty to faithfully execute the laws. And then they called in folks that are kind of surprising. You had a liberal law professor like Jonathan Turley, and Jonathan Turley is a big supporter of the president. So he comes in to testify. He's by the way, out of George Washington University. You have Elizabeth Price Foley, who's out of Florida International University College of Law. And so you've got these people who come in to testify. And it's really interesting that they themselves are very concerned over what's happening to the presidency. I mean, you take Professor Turley. He's pretty candid in saying that he agrees with President Obama's policy position. Matter of fact, I'll just read part of his testimony. He says, the fact that I happen to think the president is right on many of these policies does not alter the fact that I believe the means he is doing it is wrong and that this can be a dangerous change in our system. He continued, he says, my view is that the president has in fact exceeded his authority in a way that is creating a destabilizing influence in a 3-branch system. I want to emphasize, and he goes on to talk about, I'm alarmed by the implications of that aggregation of power. He says we're facing an imperial presidency and that we're at a constitutional tipping point.
Wait, this is a liberal
That is a
here.
liberal law professor
he's saying that we're facing an imperial presidency.
He says, I agree with this president's policy positions, but what he is doing is endangering the Constitution. He said we're at a constitutional tipping point. Now, I'm sorry to be repeating this because I'm sure you heard ABC cover this, and I'm sure CNN reported about this, and I'm sure MSNBC had a huge segment on how the liberal law professors are really concerned over what President Obama. So forgive me for being redundant here. I'm sorry, Rick.
Well, I must have missed those as well. So this is one of his fans actually saying, I agree with your policy, but the way you're going about it. So what I was saying earlier about, well, he's helping people. It doesn't matter how he does it, jokingly, of course, but that's what Turley's saying is wrong. Even if you think you're doing the right thing, if you're violating the rule book itself, the Constitution, it's more dangerous for the future of the nation than any policy you think you might be doing that would be good. You're destroying the system itself.
See, here's a liberal law professor saying, I agree with his objectives, but in this case, the end does not justify the means. And he likes the Constitution. He likes the process of the Constitution. He would probably disagree with you and me on what the Constitution is designed to ensure, because we would take a very conservative view of it. But I agree with him. The process is important, and we're at a constitutional tipping point. And so, I mean, you really, well, I like also what law professor Elizabeth Price Foley said. She says, situations like these, she says, these, quote, benevolent suspensions, and that's what I'm doing this for the good of the people. I'm suspending the Constitution for the good of the people. She said, situations like these benevolent suspensions, as they get more and more frequent and more aggressive, they're eroding our citizens' respect for the rule of law. We're a country of law and not men. And she's exactly right. But look what she said. She says this is done in the name of doing something good for the people. And so they become more and more frequent. Then she said they become more and more aggressive. And then the result is citizens have no respect for the rule of law. We say, government's absolutely worthless. And that's a result of what's happening here. So I find it really fascinating that these constitutional law professors are up in arms over this too. Now, having said all this and set this in the direction that we did, what the president's done and how even liberals are concerned with it, what I got to point out is really fascinating because you know who they were yelling at in these hearings? They were yelling at Congress for not stopping the president.
No kidding.
Yeah, no joke. Here's what Turley said. What alarms me, however, is the other two branches appear not just to be simply passive, but they're inert in the face of this concentration of authority. I mean, he jumps them for you've done absolutely nothing. And here's what Foley said. She says, if you want to stay relevant as an institution, I would suggest you not stand idly by and let the president take your power away. I mean, these two guys, they weren't on the president. They were on Congress.
They're right.
They're exactly right.
Absolutely right. I don't care, Republican or Democrat. Congress has not done its job.
Congress has not done. And I set that up specifically because I figure a lot of people are, really ticked at Obama and they want to be anti-Obama. And so I've been playing this thing up of how terrible Obama is. You know what? I'm ticked at Congress. Yeah, I'm not ticked at the president I'm ticked at Congress because they haven't shown any backbone to do what the Constitution tells them they have the right to do to stop this kind of nonsense. They're
supposed to be our representatives. They're supposed to be there defending isn't that the oath? Aren't they supposed to be defending the Constitution itself?
We're back to that thing about what the Constitution says. I thought we agreed that wasn't really relevant to this discussion.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's crazy, though? In this instance, everybody agrees that I shouldn't say everybody. The vast majority of people understand that he is way over the line.
Well,
on
even his supporters.
Occasions.
I mean, Jonathan Turley, supporter of President Obama.
Yeah.
Even he says, this is over the line. This is a constitutional tipping point, but he says, Congress, you're the ones to blame. Hey,
wow.
We're at a constitutional tipping points because you guys have become inert. You're not standing up and exercising backbone. And,
they're wimping out. They're not doing their job. We got to take a quick break. We'll come back. Let's talk about what they should be doing, David. What are the actions Congress should be taking, and how can we, the people, push them in that direction? Stay with us, folks. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation. about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Foundations of Freedom Thursday. We're talking about the imperial presidency, and even liberal law professors saying that the president has crossed the line, that we're at a constitutional tipping point, and that it's Congress's fault for not checking him. And David, that quote from the kid there as we're coming back in, that's exactly right. The Constitution gives us the chains to bind them down, but who applies those chains? If Congress doesn't do their job, he gets to keep acting like a monarch.
Well, it is, and we talked before the break about what's the solution to all this. I'm going to give the solution. Here's the solution from Chief Justice, U.S. Supreme Court, John Jay, founding father. He said, every member of the state ought diligently to read and to study the Constitution of his country. By knowing their rights, they'll sooner perceive when they're being violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. What we've got is Congress is not read and they don't know the Constitution. Therefore, they don't perceive violations and they don't prepare. They're not prepared to defend and assert them. And I can't say that exactly because they perceived enough violations to have the hearing. What they don't know enough about the Constitution is how to defend and how to assert their rights. And the Constitution, Federalist paper, it's either Federalist 59 or 79. Alexander Hamilton said the Constitution gave each of the branches what he called constitutional arms of self-defense. If your branch is being invaded, you have a way to defend yourself. And I will point out everything we talked about with the president is taking power away from Congress. He's supposed to have all of his nominees confirmed by Congress. He didn't. So there's power gone from Congress. He's supposed to faithfully execute the laws of the land. He didn't. So all the things that Congress passed, he's ignoring. There's power gone from Congress. He's doing recess appointments. That's taking power from Congress. Everything he's done is remove power from Congress, and they have not stood up to defend and to assert them. So, Rick, let me just take the Federal War Powers Act as an example. The War Powers Act says that if we engage in any type of military conflict, if we send U.S. forces into military action, that what happens is within 48 hours you have to notify Congress, and then within 30 days Congress is going to have to pass a law or something that says we agree with it, or if they don't do that, at the end of 60 days you got to have all the troops out. So
which kind of makes sense because you want him to be able to act in an emergency.
That's right.
And not have to, gather everybody together, but you don't want that to be carried on.
That's right. And so if Congress doesn't authorize that within 30 days, then you've got 30 days to get them out of there. So we had an attack against Libya where the president decided to deploy the U.S. Air Force to go in and help the forces in Libya. He did not notify Congress within 48 hours. He did not wait for 30 days. He kept our planes flying for 8 months in Libya and ignored all congressional calls to comply with the War Powers Act. He ignored it for 8 months, didn't notify Congress, didn't pull the troops out, didn't do anything. All right, so he does that. So you're a congressman, Rick. What do?
File articles of impeachment.
All right, articles of impeachment, that is one way to do it. What else do you do?
I guess you could file a bill to defund any, to say that no funds can be used by our Defense Department on this mission or on this particular situation.
But now you've hung the troops out to dry because those troops are in harm's way. You can't take money out from under them because suddenly they don't have ways to defend their planes while they're flying. You don't want to hurt the troops.
Well, wouldn't your defunding simply require them to be called home?
Yeah, but what you do is you hit him even harder. You take his favorite agency, like Health and Human Services, or you take the White House staff and you defund the White House staff and say, till you get those troops out of there, you don't have a chief of staff, you don't have anybody to carry your golf bags anymore. You go right after what hurts them most. And so you don't have to wait.
Teleprompters.
Defund
the teleprompters.
You lost your teleprompter operator.
You're cutting right to his heart then.
Exactly.
Or his brain. I don't know which one it is.
Well, whichever it is, you cut it. See, Congress can do so many things. They don't like what's happening with Obamacare. Defund it. Just don't pay for it. You don't have to get rid of the law. Just stop paying for it. I mean, they can stop paying for anything they want because the Constitution gives the House that power. By the way, if the House sets its foot down and won't fund it, it doesn't matter whether the Senate goes with it or not. Without House approval, they don't got money. So this is not a hard thing.
And I got to ask you, bro, because a lot of people say, well, but from a political point of view, then they look harsh and it hurts in the next election and blah, blah, blah. And so they let him go and they let him go and they let him go. Aren't we damaging the presidency itself and the relationship with Congress and the Constitution if we don't at least try to stop him? I mean, these members of Congress got to get the backbone.
Well, I tell you what, that's why Congress has a 14% to 9% approval rating, depending on what you look at. We're tired of trying to deal with jellyfish. You got to have some people in there with backbone. And you know what? They're right. People do get really ticked off if you try to go after the president's programs. You're going to make the New York Times mad. You'll make the Washington Post mad. You'll make the LA Times mad. You'll make all the liberal pundits mad. And everybody in Heartland America will say, finally, somebody's got some backbone. But as long as these guys want to keep listening to the bureau chiefs out of Washington, D.C., and as long as they let that run them rather than the Constitution or rather than what's good for the land, and you know what? They ought to be willing to say, hey, you know what? I may lose my seat over this, but I'm going to stand up and push back against this. And I'll guarantee most of those guys would get reelected if they would do that, if they would show that character.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Folks, thanks for listening today. It's been Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
We stand undivided.